Hey everyone, Christian Harris here with my second Christian's Conversations with. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of sitting down with Dwight Jordan, a visionary sales executive and leader in the world of partner ecosystems and strategic growth. With over a decade of proven success leading high-performing teams across companies like Insight and Software One, Dwight has mastered the art of building revenue engines that deliver. He's restructured underperforming sales organizations, delivered double-digit growth year over year. Whether it's reshaping go-to-market plans, boasting growth margins, or leading a servant leadership mindset, Dwight is consistently inspires results and the people behind him. He's not just driving growth, he's defining what great leadership in sales looks like. We had the pleasure of talking about lots of different things. Over the next few minutes, you're going to see highlights from those conversations that I think you'll really enjoy. If you do want to see the full version of our conversation, it'll be available both on YouTube and Spotify under Christian's Conversations with. Thank you, and looking forward to the next one. The one thing I'd like to get a little bit more insight for the people out there, because I thought it was great. You referenced Seinfeld, my favorite show of all time. I know Ted Lasso was to you, and I love Ted Lasso. And you talked about running on empty and how that was like with the job search, right? Certain days you felt like you were running on empty. Could you, spend like a minute and just kind of, I got it. I read that again today when I was kind of just reviewing you, and I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what it feels like some days. Can you just elaborate a little bit for the people out there?
Well, I'm going to try not to get emotional because this is a hard subject. When you have been successful in your career and you've fought hard to be successful, it feels like you get exhausted with processes that don't go your way a lot easier. But for my entire life, for some reason, I've always had struggle finding work when I'm out of work. Even when I was a young teen, I'd go apply at the normal fast food restaurants or whatever, and I couldn't get a job there to save my life. Like, it was unfathomable to me. You go down to like In-N-Out and they're just like, yeah, I don't know. It's like, what? Wait, let me look in the mirror, right? And, so I wound up, like, one of my first jobs, I was a stock boy for a fabric store, which that fabric store is now going out of business for good because nobody wants to buy fabric anymore. Maybe this isn't the right role for you. Maybe if you had a role that was more focused over here, maybe that's better for you. And yet, what I found more often than not as I interviewed, look, I'm a salesperson at heart. I'm going to ask closing questions. And I will tell you, I've been through 20 or 30 interviews over the last 7 months where I asked whether or not I was a good fit for the role and if they saw me moving forward. And 90% of them did not move forward, even though the person interviewing me answered affirmatively. And that is really a concern for me. When you think about, one, if I'm a hiring manager and I know someone's not a fit, why would I want to encourage them to do what's next? Which is, if I really want a job, I'm going to follow up.
Yeah.
And I'm going to follow up well. I'll give you an example. I actually came to a conclusion in November that I needed to, 30-minute phone interviews virtually aren't going to tell you the whole story about anyone. And I came to the conclusion after about, probably 15 first interviews that who I wasn't coming across somehow in that 30-minute interview. So I changed a little bit how I answered things and made sure that I connected the dots. But I also followed up with a presentation on my leadership philosophy and skills, along with approved recommendations from other people, right? So I would follow up and say, look, I'm highly interested in this role. We discussed A, B, and C. I think this is how I can actually help your organization. By the way, here's a little bit more about me and my philosophy. Please see that. And then you would get a response and say, oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And nowhere along the line of that follow-up did I receive an honest piece of feedback, and instead would get the dreaded 2 o'clock in the morning automated HRIS rejection letter, right? And that honestly doesn't make sense to me. And in the end, do I want to work for people like that? Probably not. And I'm probably gonna, some folks are gonna say, "Hey, I interviewed Dwight and I did exactly that." And if they see that, they're gonna say, "Oh, he must hate me." I don't hate anybody, but I am confused, and I think that there's a lot of people who are confused on the job market right now, especially in tech, because they have great skills, they've performed well in their role, and somehow in this whole mess that we're in, found ourselves out of work for an extended period of time and classified as a non-performer, when for me, I can tell you that is unequivocally not the case.
One thing I noticed from a lot of your posts, and I think if I'm right, that's John Wooden's pyramid right behind you. If I recognize that,
that's
a little bit of the picture there. Leadership's really important to you. What's the one key leadership element you're looking for, either from yourself that you can share with your coworkers and people that may work below you, or from the people above you? What's the one thing that you would hope that people say, hey, Dwight's great at this, and what you've learned maybe from Coach Wooden, in the past?
Yeah, I think what Coach Wooden brought is the fact that pyramid he lived and breathed every day. It wasn't different because he was a coach. It was literally him. And I think that if you put that in the hands of somebody who's inauthentic and doesn't believe in those things, it becomes useless. One of my favorite stories is Coach Wooden would actually start every season. He would start with the same thing, and that is he would teach his players who were exceptional how to put on their socks and their shoes properly. And you'd hear little things like, he never cursed. He would never get super angry. The most you would ever see him say would be "goodness gracious sakes alive," right? And he wouldn't say it like he's super upset at you or anything like that. I just think that's authentically who he was, and he authentically cared for the young men that he was trying to guide. And I don't think you can fake that. So authenticity is the sort of baseline, and then you build upon that with a high EQ, a high level of integrity. And if you have those things with the foundation of authenticity, I really feel like, number one, I can work with you. But number two, that's what I try to build upon, is the fact that I genuinely care about the people who work for me as a leader. And I'm not trying to do anything because they fit into a KPI or because it fits into what I have to push upstream.